Amber was only 10 years old, but she was already weathering storms that most adults wouldn't know how to navigate. Her golden hair swayed lightly as she climbed the steps of the imposing house where she lived with her family. The unexpected afternoon off should have been a blessing, a rare moment to play or delve into her childish thoughts. But today, fate had other plans. She reached out her small hand for the doorknob of her room, her fingers hesitantly inches from the cold metal. That was when she heard it. Raised voices echoed from the other side of the door, charged with an intensity that made her freeze. She tilted her head, her heart racing, catching every word. "Greg, what do you mean by sending her to boarding school?" Chloe, her stepmother's voice, was sharp, tinged with disbelief. "She's just a child. We need to be patient and loving with her. It's hard, I know, but she's only 10 and she still remembers her mother." Amber felt the ground shake beneath her feet, even though everything was still. Boarding school? Her? Why? With bated breath, she put her ear close to the door. "Chloe, you've tried so hard, but she's completely out of control," Greg said, his deep voice sounding like a verdict. "Boarding school can help her learn discipline and respect. We can't get through to her." "Maybe they can." The words were like daggers, and each syllable found its target. Amber never imagined her father would think that of her. She wasn't perfect, but was she really that terrible? For a moment, the hallway seemed to spin around her. She grabbed the doorknob to steady herself, but the next revelation made her lose all sense of stability. "Greg, you're her father," Chloe snapped. "You raised her since she was a baby, when you married her mother. Are you really willing to give up your own daughter now? I can't believe you said that, even though she still won't accept me." Amber blinked, stunned. It couldn't be. Wasn't Greg her real father? Those words hit her with overwhelming force, making her legs feel weak. Before she could process what she had just heard, darkness took over. The last sound was the dull thud of her body hitting the floor and a muffled scream coming from far away. When she opened her eyes, she found Chloe's face hovering above her, a mix of relief and concern written across her features. Amber was in her bed, surrounded by her favorite purple blanket, a familiar gesture in a moment that seemed so far from comfort. "Oh, thank God you're awake," Chloe said, her voice shaking slightly. "You scared us by passing out in the hallway. We called an ambulance, but you just seemed exhausted. Did something happen at school?" Amber stared at the ceiling, refusing to answer. The memories came back like an overwhelming wave. Greg wasn't her father. Chloe wasn't her mother. They wanted to send her away, as if she were a problem that needed to be discarded. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back quickly, refusing to let them fall in front of Chloe. Chloe sighed, the sound heavy with sadness. "I know it's hard, honey, but you can talk to me. I'm here for you, no matter what." Those words, spoken with such sincerity, only reinforced Amber's pain. How could she trust Chloe? How could she trust someone who might be in agreement with Greg? She turned her face away, refusing to look at her stepmother. An invisible but insurmountable wall seemed to separate them. After a moment of heavy silence, Chloe stood up. "I'll let you rest, but I'll be downstairs if you need anything, okay?" "Anything." Her voice wavered, and Amber realized. Chloe was just as lost as she was. But that didn't matter. Nothing else seemed to matter. The door closed softly, and the sound of Chloe's footsteps down the hall was followed by a deathly silence. That was when the tears came, hot and unstoppable. Amber buried her face in the pillow, her sobs escaping in painful spasms. Those words, that moment, had shattered her world. How had everything changed so quickly? In an instant, the safety she had felt in her home, even with its challenges, had been ripped from her small, helpless hands. Her mind began to wander, haunted by questions she didn't know how to answer. Who was her real father? Why had no one ever told her? And what would happen now? The idea of being sent to boarding school, a strange place, full of unfamiliar faces and rigid rules, was terrifying. But perhaps what frightened her most was the possibility that no one would actually want to fight for her. As the night wore on and the moonlight softly illuminated the room, Amber felt something inside her begin to shift. A small but growing spark of determination began to emerge amidst the pain. She might not be able to trust Greg or Chloe, but she needed answers. And somehow, she would find them. Months before that fateful day, Amber had experienced moments that might explain why her father seemed to want to send her away. She still remembered one episode in particular, a milestone in the turmoil that had settled in her home since Chloe's arrival. The scene began with a call that echoed cheerfully through the hallway. "Amber, can you come down, please? Your father and I have something to tell you." Chloe's voice was cheerful, almost too sweet for Amber's mood that day. Reluctantly, Amber marked the page of her favorite book, a fantasy story where the heroine faced dragons and wizards, always triumphing in the end, and went downstairs. Each step was filled with adolescent irritation. She felt that no conversation could be so important as to interrupt her refuge. At the foot of the stairs, there were Greg and Chloe, side by side. Greg, tall and imposing, looked radiant. Chloe, with her wide smile and hopeful gaze, had a sparkle in her eyes that only intensified Amber's ill will. Something inside her, a mix of intuition and resentment, warned her that she would not like what was to come. "Amber, we have amazing news," Greg began, with an enthusiasm that bordered on exaggeration. He put his arm around Chloe, in a gesture that seemed to want to underline the importance of the occasion. "Chloe is moving here. Isn't that great?" The sentence hit Amber like a gust of cold wind. She paused for a moment, digesting the words, before blurting out, "Moving here? No, it's not great." Chloe's smile wavered, but she held firm. Amber, however, was just getting started. "I don't want a new mother. I don't need a new mother. I had a mother, and she's gone, and no one can replace her, especially not you." With that, she turned on her heel, ran upstairs, and slammed the bedroom door with enough force to rattle the windows. Ever since that day, Amber had declared war on Chloe. It was a silent battle, fought with sharp words, cold stares, and calculated indifference. Chloe, however, seemed impervious. Even in the face of Amber's provocations, she maintained her composure, often telling Greg, "We need to be patient. She's hurting." But Chloe's patience didn't sway Amber. One night, Chloe showed her a stunning emerald green dress she planned to wear to an office party. Amber couldn't help but feel a twinge of admiration for the outfit, but limited it to a disinterested, "Yeah. I don't know, it's okay." Chloe, as if Amber had said something extraordinary, smiled broadly. "I'm glad you like it." But the next morning, the dress was ruined. Amber had torn it into strips, scattering the fabric across Chloe's bed like a macabre trophy. When Greg saw it, his outburst was immediate. "Amber, get down here now." Her scream echoed like thunder. Amber climbed down with her head held high, though the cold sweat on her palms betrayed her nervousness. "What were you thinking?" Greg roared. Before Amber could justify herself, Chloe intervened. Her voice was calm but charged with authority. "Greg, wait. There's no point in yelling. We need to understand why she did it. Amber blinked, confused. Was Chloe defending her? She's struggling with the pain of loss, Chloe continued firmly. Punishing her will only deepen the distance between us. Greg was reluctant, but he gave in. Amber, for her part, couldn't understand. Chloe should be furious. Why wasn't she? A few weeks later, there was another twist in her story. After her fainting, Chloe insisted that Amber be taken to the doctor. In the office, the diagnosis fell like a stone on everyone's chest. Amber, the tests show that you have acute lymphoblastic leukemia, the doctor said, with a serious expression. Cancer. The word hung in the air, thick and oppressive. Amber's only hope was a bone marrow transplant from a compatible donor. I'll do the tests right now, Greg said, without hesitation. But the doctor shook his head. Unfortunately, you won't be a match. Her biological father would be the best option. Greg's face went pale. Amber felt the ground disappear again. Biological father? So Greg wasn't her real father? I'll do the tests, Chloe declared, her voice firm. Amber looked at her in disbelief. I know I'm not related, but we have the same blood type. There might be a chance of a match. Amber felt her chest tighten. Chloe was offering to save her life. But why? After everything Amber had done to push her away, why was Chloe still willing to risk everything for her? It was something Amber couldn't understand. And maybe that question would be the spark that would start to ignite a new perspective in her mind. The day of the transplant arrived in a tense, almost palpable silence. Amber lay in her hospital bed, the sterile environment heightening her sense of vulnerability. Her eyes scanned the white ceiling as the soft sound of the monitors filled the room. Beneath the sheets, her body seemed more fragile than ever, weakened by the illness and the weeks of preparation. Chloe was at her side, holding her hand tightly, as if she wanted to transfer her strength to the girl. The anesthesiologist entered the room, moving with the practiced precision of someone accustomed to this type of situation. He checked the monitors, prepared the syringe, and said something comforting, but the words barely reached Amber's ears. Everything seemed a blur, except for the warmth of Chloe's hand clasped in hers. I'm scared, Amber finally whispered, and she hated the vulnerability in her voice. Chloe leaned in, her expression a mix of tenderness and determination. Her eyes were shining with tears she would not let fall. I know, honey. And it's okay to be scared, she replied, her voice soft but firm. But you're so brave, Amber. Stronger than you know. This transplant will work, and you'll get through this. I promise. Amber tried to find any sign of doubt in her stepmother's face, but all she saw was fierce, unwavering love. There was something in that look that seemed to wrap around Amber like a warm blanket, melting away some of her anxiety. As the numbing medication began to take effect, pulling her into darkness, her last thought before closing her eyes was a startling one. Maybe, just maybe, she'd been wrong about Chloe all along. Hours passed. The silence in the room was broken only by the steady, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Amber slowly opened her eyes, blinking against the dim light from the lamp beside her bed. Everything seemed fuzzy and distant, as if she were emerging from a deep dream. Turning her head, she saw Chloe sitting in the chair beside her bed, her head lolling to the side. She was asleep, but she was still holding Amber's hand, as if she were afraid that letting go might cause harm. Amber's heart sank at the sight. She tried to speak, but her throat was dry, as rough as sand. Still, she tried, Mom. The word came out as a hoarse whisper, barely audible. Chloe woke with a start. Her eyes widened, and a radiant smile lit up her face. Hi, honey, she said, her voice full of relief and love. How are you feeling? Amber blinked, trying to make sense of what she had just said. "Mom." The word felt strange in her mouth, but at the same time. "Right? Mom?" she repeated, a little more forcefully this time. Chloe's smile faltered for a moment, but only to be replaced by tears that were now streaming freely down her cheeks. She leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to Amber's forehead. "Yes, sweetheart," Chloe replied, her voice cracking. "I'm here. I'll always be here." Amber swallowed, feeling a lump form in her throat. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. Hot tears began to slide down her eyes. "I'm sorry for everything. For being so horrible to you. You didn't deserve any of this." Chloe brought her hand to Amber's face, gently wiping away the tears with her thumb. Her smile was sweet and reassuring. "No, sweetheart, you have nothing to apologize for. I've never held this against you, not for a second. I love you, Amber. I love you with all my heart, no matter what." Amber turned her face, pressing it into Chloe's palm. She felt the warmth and sincerity in that gesture. For the first time in a long time, she allowed comfort and love to envelop her. She felt safe, as if she were at home, even in that hospital room. Greg watched everything from the doorway, leaning against the frame. His arms were crossed, but his face was overflowing with emotion. The love he felt for his wife seemed to expand at the sight of this. Chloe, his incredible Chloe, had achieved what he thought was impossible, breaking through the wall that Amber had built around herself. He wiped his eyes discreetly, a quick gesture to erase any evidence of emotion, but there was no hiding the proud smile that formed on his lips. Chloe was his rock, his companion, the woman he knew he didn't deserve, but for whom he was grateful every day. As the soft lights of the hospital room created an aura around Amber and Chloe, Greg realized that this moment, as simple as it was a victory. Not against the disease, but against the distance that had separated his family for so long. And, in that moment, he was certain they would face whatever came together. As a true family. The year following Amber's transplant brought with it a profound transformation for the Smith family. The house, once marked by tension and silence, became a haven of togetherness and warmth. Amber, still frail, spent her days at home while she regained her strength. Chloe, determined to be there for her at all times, took a leave of absence from work to care for her and temporarily take over her education. What began as a period of medical seclusion became an unexpected opportunity to strengthen bonds that had previously seemed impossible. Mornings were dedicated to studying, but Chloe's home lessons were not limited to books and exercises. Chloe made a point of transforming every moment into a learning experience. A simple recipe in the kitchen became a chemistry lesson, while a walk in the garden led to discussions about botany and poetry. Amber, initially hesitant, began to enjoy the dynamic, appreciating the genuine effort Chloe made to make learning fun. Afternoons, on the other hand, were reserved for movies. Amber and Chloe would curl up on the couch, covered in a soft blanket, eating popcorn and laughing at silly comedies or crying together at emotional dramas. And at night, when the silence fell over the house, they would have deeper conversations. Amber would start confiding in Chloe about her thoughts and fears, while Chloe would patiently listen and share stories from her own childhood, creating an invisible but solid bridge between their hearts. Greg, despite continuing to work, made sure to be as involved as possible. He would take care of meals, drive Amber to doctor's appointments, and insist on family game nights. Together, the three of them created a balance that made the recovery period easier than Amber could have imagined. When the doctors finally gave the long-awaited news that Amber was healthy enough to return to school, the house was in an uproar. Amber, with a sparkle in her eyes that Chloe hadn't seen in a long time, embraced the news as an opportunity for a new beginning. But before she walked out the door that first day, she did something that surprised everyone. As Chloe adjusted her backpack on her shoulders, Amber suddenly turned and threw her arms around her waist. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything. I love you." Chloe froze for a moment, as if the gravity of the words needed a moment to settle in her heart. When tears finally began to stream down her cheeks, she knelt in front of Amber, holding her by the shoulders. "I love you too, my love," Chloe replied, her voice breaking. "More than anything." Greg, who was watching from across the room, turned his face away to hide the tears that were also flooding his eyes. For him, this moment was not only a milestone in the relationship between Amber and Chloe, it was proof that, together, they had overcome something immense. 2 years after the transplant, the Smith family received another blessing. Chloe and Greg welcomed a healthy baby girl, Layla, into the world. Amber, now a confident teenager, embraced her new role as big sister with enthusiasm. She spent time with Layla, rocking her, helping with diaper changes, and even singing her own lullabies. "You're the best little helper I could ask for," Chloe said, smiling at the sight of them together. Amber shrugged, but a glint of pride lit her eyes. She knew the words meant something much more. She was an essential part of their family, as loved as Layla. One sunny afternoon, as they played in the park, Amber pushed the swing with Layla, beaming with joy. Chloe stood a few feet away, watching them both with a warm heart. It was then that an elderly woman, who was sitting on a nearby bench, commented with a smile. "That's so beautiful to see. It's so nice of you to help your stepmother, dear." Amber stopped abruptly, turning to the woman. Her normally sweet eyes flashed with indignation. "She's not my stepmother," Amber said firmly, her voice thick with conviction. "She's my mother. My real mother. The best mother in the world." Chloe, who was approaching with the baby carriage, heard Amber's declaration clearly. She stopped in her tracks, her hands shaking slightly. The words sank deep into her heart, filling every corner with indescribable joy. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time, they weren't of sadness or frustration. They were of pure gratitude. Amber ran to Chloe and, without hesitation, gave her a tight hug. "I meant every word," she whispered, her voice muffled against Chloe's chest. Chloe smiled, her arms wrapping tightly around Amber. "And I always knew," she replied softly. Greg, who was arriving at the park at that moment, saw the three of them together, illuminated by the afternoon sun. He stopped for a moment, taking in the scene. This was his family, imperfect, resilient, united. And, above all, full of love. As Amber returned to the swing with Layla, Chloe stood next to Greg. He took her hand, squeezing it lightly. "I think we did it," he said, his voice low but full of emotion. Chloe looked at him, smiling. "Yes. We did it. And we did it together. Because, in the end, that's what really matters, the love we build, the bonds we choose to strengthen, and the certainty that it's never too late to start over." If you liked the story, I'm sure that one of the videos that is here on the screen will move you too. But before you click, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our next videos. A big hug and see you in the next story.